The terminal roared like a storm, and Marcus Cole said, "Why does the air taste like goodbye again?" He froze at gate 27 when a soft cry cut through the noise. Aaliyah Bennett cradled a baby, and pain flashed across her eyes. Marcus said, "Aaliyah, is that your son?" Her jaw trembled, and she held the child closer. She said, "We have a flight to catch." His chest burned with a memory he could not bury. He said, "You vanished after that fight." Aaliyah said, "You chose money over truth." The baby fussed, and the world narrowed to 3 heartbeats. Marcus said, "Tell me his name." She whispered, "Zion." He tasted the word like a prayer. A gate agent announced boarding, and the crowd surged. Fear and hope boxed inside his ribs. He said, "Please, do not walk away." Aaliyah stared at the floor, then at him. She said, "Do not ask questions you are not ready to hear." Marcus paced beside the window and counted the seconds between departures. He said, "I did not come here to beg." Yet his voice cracked as a plane lifted into haze. Aaliyah kept rocking Zion and kept her gaze on anything but him. She said, "You always came too late." He swallowed pride like fire. He said, "Tell me what I missed." She shook her head and pressed her cheek to the child. She said, "Everything that matters." A cleaner's cart rattled by and made the moment feel cheap. Marcus said, "I built an empire and lost the only voice I need." Aaliyah flinched at the word empire. She said, "Money cannot swaddle at 3 a.m. Zion sighed, and the sound cracked him open. Marcus said, "Let me hold him." Silence landed like a warning. She said, "Not yet." The window fogged where her breath touched glass. Aaliyah said, "You left me with questions and a heartbeat that would not slow." Marcus stared at his shoes like they were guilty. He said, "I thought I was protecting you from my world." She laughed without sound, and it hurt more than shouting. She said, "You protected your image." A group passed, and the moment held. Marcus said, "I searched when you disappeared." She said, "Your lawyers searched, not you." Shame crawled up his throat like smoke. He said, "I deserve that." Zion tugged the blanket and revealed sleepy eyes. Aaliyah softened, then steeled herself hard again. She said, "He needs stability, not headlines." Marcus nodded like a man learning to breathe. He said, "Then I will learn." The gate pinged, and the word boarding felt like a countdown on his heart. Tasha Reed appeared with a paper cup and a stare that could cut velvet. She said, "I step away 5 minutes, and chaos arrives." Aaliyah exhaled like she had been waiting for backup. "Marcus," said Tasha, "please do not do this here." Tasha stood between them like a locked door. She said, "Where were you when bottles ran dry and bills screamed?" Marcus winced and took the words. He said, "Tell me how to help now." Tasha said, "Start by listening without a lawyer." The cup steamed, and the scent of cheap coffee felt holy. Aaliyah said, "We are just trying to leave clean." Marcus said, "Leaving does not erase blood." Zion yawned, and the world hushed. Tasha's eyes softened a breath. She said, "Then prove you can stand still." An agent called final boarding, and the syllables cracked the hour. Marcus said, "If Zion is mine, I will not miss another first." Aaliyah blinked hard and looked at Tasha. Tasha said, "Truth now, or the plane swallows regrets." Aaliyah's voice shook as she held the child. She said, "I tried to tell you, and doors kept answering instead." Marcus touched his chest like a vow. He said, "Test me, question me, but do not hide him from me." The agent raised a brow at the standoff. Zion pressed his face to Aaliyah's collar and sighed. She said, "His last name is Bennett." Marcus nodded, hurt blooming quiet. He said, "I will earn every letter he carries." The scanner beeped and the future leaned forward. Morning found a quiet corner near the family lounge where time moved slower. Marcus Cole said, "I remember South Side nights and a mother who worked doubles." He traced the window edge like a rosary. Aaliyah Bennett said, You wore hunger like armor and called it drive. He nodded and let the old ache breathe. He said, I promised I would never be poor again, and I turned into someone I barely knew. She looked at Zion, and then at him. She said, you forgot tenderness has its own currency. Tasha Reed arrived with a blanket and a stare that measured truth. Tasha said, tell her the part about your father leaving. Marcus swallowed the ghost that still lived in his jaw. He said, he left before I could spell his name. The admission scraped him raw. Aaliyah said, and you left first when love asked you to stay. A gate chime floated like a warning bell, and silence settled heavy as rain. A baggage drone whirred past like a steel bee, and pulled them into memory. Aaliyah said, I was 23 with a dream that squeaked like a new shoe. She smiled at a version of herself that only she could see. She said, I sang Fridays at the Blue Lantern and waited tables for rent. Marcus Cole said, I sent roses and lawyers when I should have sent myself. She shook her head with a soft ache. She said, you sent terms and I needed touch. Tasha Reed said, I watched her study at 3 a.m. and still show up glowing at 8. Marcus rubbed his sternum like a bruise. He said, I kept winning headlines and losing rooms that mattered. Aaliyah said, I stopped believing you could hear over the noise. The drone faded, and the hush felt like a stage after the last note. A lull in announcements opened a door to confession. Marcus Cole said, the first million felt holy, and then it felt lonely. He looked at the runway like it could judge him. He said, every investor loved my spine and none asked my heart. Aaliyah Bennett said, I asked and you filed me under costs. Her words landed soft and sharp. He winced and did not argue. He said, I measured success in zeros and forgot the weight of names. Tasha Reed said, names like Bennett and Zion. The baby stirred and sighed a small amen. Aaliyah brushed his curls and steadied. She said, I built a life with spare parts and quiet courage. Marcus nodded with a humility that looked new. He said, teach me the courage that does not need a contract. The paw pinged, and the world exhaled. A snack bar clatter broke the spell, and choice returned like weather. Aaliyah Bennett said, what does love look like after press releases? Her voice was steady, but frayed. Marcus Cole said, it looks like showing up with no entourage and no exit plan. He placed his phone face down as if it were guilty. Tasha Reed said, it looks like diapers at 2 and apologies at 7. He nodded and let the lesson mark him. He said, it looks like listening until the pride drains out. Aaliyah weighed the words like currency. She said, words cost less than time. He said, then bill me in hours and years. She almost smiled and then guarded it. She said, begin with today. The coffee machine hissed like a coach's whistle, and the scene reset. They moved to a quieter gate where the carpet swallowed footsteps. Marcus Cole said, my company can run an audit, but my heart needs practice. He breathed slow, like he was learning a new instrument. He said, I want to know Zion before I try to be anything to him. Aaliyah Bennett held the child closer and studied his face. She said, he likes humming and hates loud claps. Tasha Reed said, he sleeps best to rain sounds. Marcus smiled like dawn. He said, I can learn rain by heart. Aaliyah searched his eyes for the trap that used to hide there. She said, if you mean this, do not vanish when the headlines change. He nodded with a vow that felt heavier than gold. He said, I will be here when the cameras blink and when they die. A plane rolled past like a slow heartbeat, steady and sure. The terminal woke mean, and a camera flash split the quiet like lightning. Marcus Cole said, they found us. Aaliyah Bennett tucked Zion closer and steadied her breath. Tasha Reed said, keep moving and keep your chin high. Another flash popped like a taunt. Marcus said, this is my storm, not yours. Aaliyah said, storms do not ask whose name they flood. A ringtone clawed the air. Simone Price, said Marcus, step away and I will handle optics. He stared at the glass and saw the boy's reflection. He said, optics do not rock a child to sleep. The crowd slowed, hungry for a headline. Tasha said no statements. Aaliyah said no more shields either. Simone said, you are trending, and not in a kind way. Marcus lowered his voice like a prayer. He said, let them trend while I learn to stand still. They ducked into a quieter corridor where announcements softened. Simone Price said, investors want distance and a line. Marcus Cole said, tell them the line is fatherhood. Aaliyah Bennett watched his face like a lie detector. She said, lines snap when money pulls. He met her stare and did not flinch. He said, then let them snap. Tasha Reed said, words are foam, action is brick. A call buzzed again, and pressure grew teeth. Simone said, if the story confirms paternity, markets will bite. Marcus said, let them bite and find no fear. Aaliyah touched Zion's curls and steadied her voice. She said, fear lives in bills and bassinets. He said, then I will pay in days and dawns. The corridor hummed like a throat that wanted to sing. A family restroom sign offered privacy like a truce. Aaliyah Bennett said, I will not bury my son under your boardroom. Marcus Cole breathed slow and nodded. He said, I came to claim a life, not a headline. Tasha Reed said, claiming means diapers, not declarations. Simone Price said, there is a clean path with an NDA and supervised visits. Aaliyah laughed once and it cut the air. She said, supervised by who? Your brand. Marcus stepped closer to the edge of his old self and stopped. He said, no papers before trust. Simone said, trust will not calm the market. Tasha said, trust will calm a child. The pop pinged, and the world waited for someone to blink first. They reached a lounge threshold guarded by velvet ropes and polite smiles. Simone Price said, 5 minutes inside, and I erased the noise. Marcus Cole stared at the rope like a boundary in his chest. He said, noise is the tax for truth. Aaliyah Bennett said, truth is not a lounge you comp. Tasha Reed said, we are not props for your cleanup. Simone's voice cooled to glass. She said, then prepare for teeth. Marcus lifted his phone and typed a message like he was carving stone. He said, draft a statement that says I will meet the tests and the nights. Aaliyah watched the message send like a flare. She said, do not let it be the last brave thing you do today. He said, it will be the first. Perk at the counter lifted her brow at the tension and waited. Marcus Cole said, I need to change my flight and my life. The words surprised even him, and then fit. Aaliyah Bennett said, what does that look like by morning? He said, breakfast, a stroller, and a quiet park. Tasha Reed said, add formula and patience. Simone Price sighed like a closing door. She said, your board will revolt. He said, then let them learn my new math. Aaliyah studied the ground, then his face. She said, do not promise the sun when all we need is a lamp. He nodded and breathed like a man stepping into rain. He said, I can carry a lamp and keep it lit. The announcement board flickered, and truth rode in on its glow. Aaliyah Bennett said, Zion carries your eyes, Marcus. The words cracked open a silence that had been waiting years. Marcus Cole swallowed hard, shoulders trembling. He said, say it again. Aaliyah held her son like proof carved in flesh. She said, he is yours. The air shifted as if the terminal itself gasped. Tasha Reed pressed a palm over her mouth, eyes wide. Marcus whispered, my son, as though the syllables could shatter him. Simone Price typed a furious note and said, this changes exposure. Marcus said, this changes me. He stepped closer, hands shaking, not daring to reach. Aaliyah's eyes brimmed with fear and longing. She said, you cannot unhear it now. The baby stirred, as if sealing the truth with breath. Marcus Cole said, all these years, and I missed first words, first steps. His voice cracked, bending under weight. Aaliyah Bennett said, I tried to tell you, but doors slammed louder than my calls. Simone Price said, we need a test before public exposure. Marcus snapped, no test before trust. The baby whimpered, tiny sound cutting through adult wars. Tasha Reed said, he does not care for stock or statements, only presence. Aaliyah's lips trembled. She said, I was afraid you would love your empire more than him. Marcus whispered, he is my empire now. Simone said, empires fall if you abandon the throne. Marcus looked at her like she was made of smoke. He said, then let it burn. A group of reporters pressed near the rope, hungry eyes flashing. Aaliyah Bennett whispered, they smell blood. Marcus Cole said, let them smell, but they will see strength. Simone Price hissed, strength is crafted, not spilled. He turned toward the cameras, chest rising like a tide. He said, this is my son, and I will not hide him. Aaliyah gripped his sleeve, voice sharp. She said, do not use him as shield. Marcus said, no shield, only truth. Tasha Reed muttered, truth comes with claws. The crowd surged, questions clawing the air. Simone said, say nothing, Marcus. He lifted his chin anyway, defiance cracking his silence. A sudden voice broke the chaos, deep, smooth, familiar. David Bennett said, so he admits it at last. Marcus Cole froze, chest tightening. Aaliyah Bennett's blood drained from her face. She whispered, not now. David, older and broad, stepped closer with a bitter smile. He said, I warned you he would break you. Marcus said, and who broke you, David? Tasha Reed muttered, old ghosts walk bold tonight. Simone Price leaned in, whispering, handle this off camera. David's eyes burned into Marcus. He said, you think money can father where love failed. Aaliyah clutched Zion tighter and whispered, please, stop. David Bennett's voice thundered louder than the storm. He said, you will not stain my family with your chaos. Marcus Cole stepped forward, voice low but sharp. He said, your silence raised walls she bled against. Aaliyah Bennett trembled, torn between father and lover. She said, this war leaves scars on Zion, not you. Tasha Reed said, enough. This is not a trial, it is a child. Simone Price whispered, every camera is drinking this. David jabbed a finger at Marcus. He said, you will leave before dawn. Marcus stood firm, shoulders squared. He said, I am done leaving. Aaliyah's tears spilled, caught between history and hope. The storm outside cracked the sky wide open. The storm outside echoed inside as Marcus Cole and David Bennett stood chest to chest. Marcus said, I will not step aside again. David's voice cracked with fury. He said, you will not rewrite what you ruined. Aaliyah Bennett clutched Zion and whispered, both of you, stop before he hears this war. Tasha Reed said, truth, shouted, becomes poison. Simone Price's phone buzzed with endless alerts. She said every outlet is already live. Marcus exhaled heavy, his voice low. He said, let the world see a man claiming his son. David's glare burned with old pride. He said, you are no father, just a headline in waiting. Marcus snapped back, I am flesh, not press. The words struck like thunder, making even the baby stir. The baby cried out, a wail sharper than any word. Aaliyah Bennett rocked him desperately. She said, this is not about thrones, this is about lullabies. Marcus Cole's eyes softened, tears catching the storm light. He said, Zion, I am here, I am not leaving again. David Bennett's jaw clenched, regret flickering beneath rage. He said, promises are cheap, staying costs blood. Tasha Reed snapped, then let him pay in sleepless nights, not stock options. Simone Price whispered, this moment will bury or crown you. Marcus stepped closer to Aaliyah, voice raw. He said, give me one chance to hold him. Aaliyah hesitated, fear and hope fighting. She whispered, "Do not break him like you broke me." He said, "I will break before he does." The clerk's announcement of final boarding cut through the storm like a blade. Aaliyah Bennett's shoulders trembled, her lips pressed to Zion's curls. She said, "If I walk away, it is forever." Marcus Cole said, "If you stay, I will earn every second." David Bennett thundered, "You cannot trust him." Tasha Reed said, "Trust is risk, but love without it is death." Simone Price hissed, "The market will eat you alive if you choose this." Marcus turned, voice unshaken. He said, "Let it eat, as long as my son eats first." Aaliyah looked between father and lover, torn like paper. She whispered, "I cannot carry both your wars." Marcus reached his hand, trembling. He said, "Carry only my vow." The storm roared louder, glass vibrating. Marcus Cole's voice cut through like fire. He said, "I lost you once, Aaliyah. Losing him will end me." Aaliyah Bennett's tears finally fell. She said, "You broke my heart into pieces sharp enough to bleed me for years." Marcus said, "Then let me bleed to build it back." David Bennett spat, "Fools rebuild with rubble." Tasha Reed snapped, "But rubble can still hold roots." Simone Price muttered, "You are destroying your future." Marcus turned on her fierce. He said, "This is my future." He dropped to his knees before Aaliyah, hands open, no pride left. He said, "Zion deserves a father who bends." The silence swallowed even thunder. The jet bridge doors opened, white light spilling like judgment. Aaliyah Bennett whispered, "I cannot undo the past, Marcus." He said, "I do not ask for yesterday, only tomorrow." Zion yawned, small and fragile, and the world seemed to wait on his breath. David Bennett turned away, fists shaking, voice low. He said, "Do what you want, but no betrayal breeds fast." Tasha Reed touched Aaliyah's arm. She said, "Choose love, not fear." Simone Price muttered, "The board will crucify you." Marcus said, "Let them. I will rise in lullabies, not numbers." Aaliyah closed her eyes, leaned into the storm's howl, and placed Zion gently into Marcus' trembling arms. He whispered, "My son," and the night broke open with hope and ruin all at once. Night thinned to a hush as the storm drained from the glass. Marcus Cole cradled Zion and breathed like he had found air after years underwater. He said, "I do not know the melody yet, but I will learn it by heart." Aaliyah Bennett watched his hands steady and fought the urge to believe too fast. She said, "Gentle, he startles easy when lights flicker." Marcus hummed until the child loosened into sleep, and the room shifted warmer. Tasha Reed said, "That is the sound of a man practicing fatherhood." Simone Price moved back a step and let her phone dim for once. She said, "If you keep this path, we craft the truth, not spin it." Marcus nodded without looking away from Zion. He said, "Truth first, paperwork later." Aaliyah's shoulders fell like armor unclasped. She said, "Tomorrow begins with rules and breakfast." Morning peeled open with a pale sky and the taste of new vows. Marcus Cole arrived with a small cart of bottles, wipes, and nerves. He said, "I googled everything and still feel unready." Aaliyah Bennett set a firm tone that did not hide mercy. She said, "Safety seat checked, hands washed, no photos without consent." Marcus obeyed each word like a metronome. He said, "Copy," and lived. Tasha Reed brewed tea and turned chaos into steps. She said, "Schedule first, then breathe." Simone Price hovered near the window, measuring risk and possibility. She said, "A quiet statement after a quiet day will serve you." Marcus met Aaliyah's gaze with steady heat. He said, "Serve him first, we speak to markets later." Aaliyah exhaled and drew lines they both could honor. By noon they sat in a small clinic where clocks ticked like judges. Aaliyah Bennett said, "I trust my eyes, but the law trusts forms." Marcus Cole reached for the pen and did not shake. He said, "We honor both, truth and proof." Simone Price said, clarity now will spare storms later. Tasha Reed squeezed Aaliyah's hand like a bridge held steady. She said, let this be the last time doubt speaks louder than love. Marcus signed and breathed out years of unfinished sentences. He said, whatever this paper says, my choice is the same. Aaliyah accepted the quiet courage in his tone. She said, then we wait without twisting the knife. The nurse smiled like a witness to a softer war. The world outside moved, but inside a future took root. Afternoon softened into a park where planes stitched quiet lines overhead. Marcus Cole pushed a stroller like it was a promise on wheels. He said, tell me his songs and his storms. Aaliyah Bennett named favorite lullabies, and the cry that means hunger, not fear. She said, he calms to rain, sounds and hums to low voices. David Bennett appeared on the path with years in his eyes. He said, I was wrong to lead with thunder. Marcus stood still and chose respect over victory. He said, I want a village, not a winner. David's breath broke and found steadier ground. He said, protect my daughter and my grandson, and I will learn to trust slow. Tasha Reed watched the men redraw the map. She said, start where the child is. Peace did not sing yet, but it hummed. Evening gathered them back at the suite where silence felt earned, not forced. Marcus Cole laid out a simple plan with times written in his careful hand. He said, mornings for feedings, afternoons for walks, nights for calls if he stirs. Aaliyah Bennett read every line like a contract with her heart. She said, if a meeting calls, you call us first. Marcus nodded as if he had waited all his life to be instructed. He said, you have my numbers, and the blocks are gone. Simone Price said, I will brief the board on boundaries they cannot buy. Tasha Reed grinned at the rare sight of agreement. She said, look at us choosing peace like grown folk. Marcus extended his palm, not for show. He said, thank you for trusting me with the lamp. Aaliyah placed her hand over his and did not pull away. The terminal quieted to a hum, night holding its breath as if it knew the story was almost spent. Marcus Cole stood near the window with Zion against his chest. He said, for the first time, silence does not scare me. Aaliyah Bennett leaned on the glass, her reflection broken by raindrops. She said, I forgot what it felt like to hope without trembling. Tasha Reed pulled her jacket tighter and smirked softly. She said, you both still look scared, but at least it is the right kind. Simone Price stepped forward, her voice low. She said, the world will write you into columns, but only you decide what tomorrow looks like. Marcus kissed Zion's head and whispered, tomorrow starts with his breath, not headlines. Aaliyah closed her eyes and let the words settle. Boarding calls echoed like faint memories now. Aaliyah Bennett said, we could still walk away and vanish, safer maybe, quieter. Marcus Cole's voice carried weight instead of fear. He said, vanishing is death in disguise. Staying is risk, but also life. Tasha Reed said, life means work, and work means mess, but mess means real. Simone Price typed quick notes and said, I can frame a statement that shows love first, numbers second. Marcus looked at Aaliyah, as if every breath depended on her answer. He said, I do not need an empire, I need us. Zion stirred and gave a small sigh, as though punctuating the vow. Aaliyah's lips curved, faint, fragile as dawn. She said, then risk it with me, not for me. David Bennett returned in a hush, his coat damp with storm, his pride cracked at the seams. He said, I spoke in anger, not wisdom. Aaliyah Bennett's voice trembled. She said, you wounded us with silence and sharpened words. David's eyes watered against his will. He said, I lost my way when grief blinded me. Do not inherit that blindness. Marcus Cole stood straighter, Zion in his arms. He said, I will not fight you, David. I will fight for them. Tasha Reed broke the weight with a whisper. She said, sometimes healing limps, but it still moves forward. Simone Price lowered her phone and let the moment stand naked. David touched Zion's cheek gently, and the boy did not stir. He said, "This time, I will not walk away." Morning bled pale light into the glass, the storm gone but its memory heavy. Aaliyah Bennett said, "The world outside is loud, but this small circle is ours." Marcus Cole said, "Then let it be strong enough to hold the noise out." Tasha Reed sipped cold coffee and laughed soft. She said, "Strong circles need stubborn love and softer edges." Simone Price nodded, voice calmer than before. She said, "I can shape the noise into something survivable, but only if you live the truth, not pose it." Marcus pressed his cheek to Zion's head. He said, "Truth is breathing right here in my arms." Aaliyah reached for Marcus's free hand, finally not pulling back. She said, "Let us build days, not headlines." The last call faded, leaving only their breaths and the hum of machines. Marcus Cole whispered, "I was lost in gold, but I found a crown in his cry." Aaliyah Bennett said, "I feared forever would stay broken, but maybe it can bend instead." Tasha Reed smiled, faint and tired. She said, "Bent steel holds stronger than fresh." Simone Price exhaled, voice almost kind. She said, "Then let this ending haunt the markets with love they cannot buy." David Bennett's voice was low, humbled. He said, "Do not repeat my mistake, son." Marcus kissed Zion's forehead, tears catching sunrise light. He said, "I will not. My kingdom is right here." The silence after his vow was heavier than thunder, and it lingered like a final hymn.